To the Event Innovator Show. I am here today with Megan Huber. And Megan and I met on Facebook. We don't actually remember how we met, it was through some common connection. But here's what's interesting: we've been following each other for a long time on Facebook, and all of a sudden, she talks about playing tennis after a long time. And we realized we have this common interest in tennis because I played high school tennis. She played college tennis and was even a teaching professional for a while. And so we've had a bunch of conversations about tennis that led to us saying we should get on a podcast, not to talk about tennis, but to talk about community building and events. So, Megan, so exciting to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, excited to be on the show. And, before we press record, we were just chatting about the types of things that we post about ourselves on social media. And, you were saying like sometimes you like to post about all the things, and business coaches say like just focus on one thing. But had I not, shared a post about my tennis, we would not have connected with each other. So sometimes when you talk about your interests, it attracts all different walks of life, and sometimes they become a client, and sometimes they're a collaborative partner, and sometimes you get on their podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We've been talking about the podcast before I knew tennis, but that's what kind of cemented it. Oh, we have to do this. So,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. We said we weren't sure the angle on tennis, but one of the things that's cool about tennis and pickleball is there's a community around that sport. People who love that sport have a certain language they talk. Like right now, as we're recording, it's Wimbledon, and I bet you've watched some already. I know I have, even though it's 5, 6 hours different from my time zone, because I just love it. And I was there 30 years ago. I
You've
was,
been to Wimbledon? It's
I've
one of
been to
my dreams to
Wimbledon.
go.
Yeah, it's the only one that I've been to of the Grand Slams, but I've been there, and so it feels like, oh, I know that place.
Yeah, that's so cool. I have not watched much. It's on the TV screen when I go to the gym in the morning, so I catch it a little bit there because we don't have the type of cable that we get those channels. Unfortunately, because I would be spending all my time watching tennis, and maybe fortunately.
Yeah,
But there's a
exactly.
guy, I don't know his name, Cam. His name is Cam, Cam, and he is, I believe, Australian, and he has a YouTube channel where he doesn't stream the matches, but he's commentating the matches the entire time. And then he's got like the scores up and everything. And I have like fallen in love with listening to his commentator ability with the tennis matches. And I can almost visualize what he's saying, even though, I mean, I'm just listening to him talk about it, but I really like listening to him.
Yeah, and events is what we're here to talk about. And tennis events are a breed of their own. Like
They
the
are.
way they design it, the way they get people in the crowd, and every single one that you watch has a different culture, which is also true about events. Like if you're watching something in Europe, you start hearing soccer fan type chants. If you're watching the US Open in New York, you're hearing just the late night rowdies. If it's England, it's very reserved. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that that's true. And I think all of our events, and you do a lot of events in our all about virtual and in-person events, everyone has a different culture and a different feel.
They do. That's a really interesting point. And I think even when you host your own events, each one of your events may have its own culture and feel, even though it's still the same you and it's still the same content. I really learned that the culture of the room or the personality of a group of people, even when it's still you leading that room. I learned about that when I was a high school teacher. So that is my background. I was a high school teacher in my 20s. I taught computer programs and business classes. And I was teaching, 3 classes first semester and 3 classes second semester. So I had 6 different groups of kids coming in my classroom in a year long period of time. And I was teaching like the same 2 or 3 classes all year long, but I could kind of characterize every single group. Like this group, they were the rowdy group. This group, they were the super quiet group. This group, they were the introverts. This group, they were the extroverts. These were the seniors. These were the fresh. So it was really interesting. And even though it was the same me, it was the same classroom and it was the same content, the people in the room, the people in the community, the people who say yes to the event, they also are kind of bringing their own, they're bringing their own personality, they're bringing their own characteristics and traits. And as an event leader, or as a leader of a community, you have to really pick up on who the people are in the room, because you're not always going to have the same people in the room. And I think that to a degree also kind of shapes um, how your event is going to feel to the people. Yes, we're the one setting the tone and we're the one who's setting the culture, or somebody else is going to set it for you. But really getting to know who's going to be in the room at this event and designing your event around the people in the room makes it, I mean, it really keeps you on your toes as a leader for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about that. I run a large event. It sounds to me like the events that you're part of are maybe smaller, 100 or less people. Is that a
100 or
fair
less.
statement?
Yeah. Hmm.
So your role as a leader is a lot stronger in a small event than it is in a large event. You can set all the things in motion for a large event, but the groups of people that come and the way they start behaving does take over unless you set a culture of a certain variety with the staff. Like the staff to me ends up being the main way that I set culture, and then the speakers that we bring. The
Right.
speakers really do as well, because if they're generous people, they're outgoing, and they're in the middle of the culture, that's different than if they come in, drop their knowledge, and leave. Those are two
Hmm.
very different attitudes, and it sets a different culture. But let's talk about it, because your high school experience sounds interesting. This
Hmm.
wasn't where we were going to go, but we will get to some of the things we wanted to talk about. What are some of the things that you do intentionally when you're reading the room and you want to leverage yourself, but also the people in the room, so that it's the environment that's going to lead to the results that you want? And that is one of the things we want to talk about. Is we're always starting with the end in mind. Culture is one of the things that can affect that. If you have a
Hmm.
negative culture, a sour culture, people are, not comfortable being there. They're trying to get out of there as quickly as they can. You may not get the result that you want. So,
Hmm.
what are you thinking about as you look at each group that you're meeting with?
Yeah, there's a large sized mastermind that I'm a part of. It's in the real estate investing category, and I am part of the board of directors of that particular group. And one of the big pieces of that culture are two live events. So we host two live events a year, and there are about 250 people at them. I actually MC one of the days of that event. And I also usually have my own breakout room during breakout room sessions on one of the days. And usually I'm talking about retention, because that's the reason why I'm in this particular group, because a lot of them are educators and coaches. And I'm also known for retention and client experience. So I do a breakout room on retention. And uh, this was probably 6 months ago. I think it was two events, one or two events ago. Not our most recent event, but our September event last year. And there was a guy in the room who I have a relationship with. I know him, we're friends, and I know his personality. And when I'm in a room with adults, because my background is teaching, I still tend to look at people like they're my teenagers, because adults are still just like they were when they were teenagers. You still have a room full of people with ADHD. You still have a room full of people where half are introverts and half are extroverts. You've got your people who are restless. You have your people who get really distracted. And this particular guy, I had a long conversation with him earlier that day at lunch, and I found that he was a very, very good storyteller. And he also had experience working for other large scale companies, kind of directing client experience and client success results. And so I was teaching on some topic, and I wanted to specifically call on this person in the room because I knew, number one, he would be a good storyteller and people would listen to him. Number two, I knew that he's more like ADHD, kind of restless, really wouldn't be paying attention unless I called on him to share. And I also wanted to show other people in the room that the person standing at the front of the room is not the only person that you should be here to learn from. And it also shows like we can all be givers and we can also receive in here. And I try to do that when I am running my own events with adults as an adult when I was a teacher. So how did I learn how to do that? That's just one small little example, but I learned how to do that as a high school teacher. And the way I would figure out students, this was my trick. My classroom was at the end of a hallway, And my classroom's door was literally at the end. And so if you look down the hallway, you stared into the door of my classroom. So I would stand outside my door and I would watch my kids walk down the hallway towards me, and I would observe their behavior. And I would watch how they walked down the hallway, who they interacted with, their eyes, their eye contact, their body language. I'd try to figure out what mood they were in. And with teenagers, it's really easy to figure that out. And so I would kind of pick up on cues as they were walking in my room. And you only have what, like a couple of minutes to do that in between classes when bells are ringing. And then as they walked through my door, I would make eye contact with them. I would welcome them into my classroom and I would observe how they interacted with me. And then to the best of my ability, I would keep like one eye on the classroom and what they were doing before the bell rang for class to actually start. So I could pick up on who are my hyper ones, who just like broke up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, who is my super introvert who walked down the hallway with a hoodie over their head and you have to tell them to look up to even see their eyeballs. So you just kind of figure that out, and then you figure out like which ones are the super smart ones, which ones are going to give me a really hard time with their behavior. And I would try to figure out then, okay, what do I have in my classroom where I could help this person feel like a leader in my classroom, and in a way almost distract them from the thing that they're actually distracting themselves with and distracting other people with, which is usually themselves. And that, I mean, I ran a tight ship as a classroom and people got results. It's the same thing when we're running events. It's keeping an eye on the people, and it's having a fixed agenda, but being very, very flexible based on the personalities of the people in the room, how they're relating to each other, how they're participating, engaging, or not. Are you in a room where there's a ton of people and half of them are on their cell phones? That's the worst. That's the worst when you're standing up there and half the people have their head down in their cell phone. That's the hardest thing I think we're up against now with events, because I see it when I MC, and you've got to figure out in seconds the mood of the room and the personalities of the people in the room, and you have to know how to kind of mold that and shape it in the way that you want to, so that you get engagement and participation with the people.
Yeah, you've said several things there that are really interesting. One is, I hadn't thought about this before, but I have had someone say this as a speaker, why not stand outside the door as people are coming in and greet them, but also get a sense of who they are? And like you just did, pick up on some stories that you can call upon from the stage. Because I think one of the ways you counter the cell phone phenomenon is you engage people in conversation from the stage before it even starts.
Mm-hmm.
You work the room, your MC's working the room, the MC gets things going before it even gets going. And I think that's super important. But then the fact that you've got some of these categories in your mind and you know what you're looking for, because I would think you're looking for those people that you want to draw in who, like you said, it's going to make the room feel like there's a lot more experts here than I thought. You can say that, but when they actually hear it, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I want to talk to that guy. I like his
Mm-hmm.
story. But then there's the people who can be disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you draw them in a way that feels like, oh, they've got something to offer and they're not going to distract anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's really fascinating to think that through as a
Mm-hmm.
presenter, but also as an event organizer, standing at the door. Who am I watching for? What am I watching for? Do I see a lot of people who are fatigued? Do I see people who are sitting by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
who aren't engaged at all? How do I help them? I
Mm-hmm.
think as organizers, we can be thinking about all these things. So I love
Yeah.
that you brought that up.
Well, and it's knowing, I love that too. And it's knowing like what little things can I say to people when they're walking into the room. And I tend to use a little bit of humor, almost, I mean, I would say like borderline flirtatious, not in like a romantic type of way. That's not what I mean. But like with men and women, it's like this, you just have to pick up on things with people and then say something funny or something humorous. And really it is like you being a little bit playful and a little bit flirtatious with people for like a millisecond, because people are so distracted and they're in their heads and they're thinking about 500 other things, and it has nothing to do with what's happening at that event, and it has nothing to do with anything that's going on in that room. And you kind of want to, humor really like breaks down people's barriers and their guard and their wall, because most of us have that up when we are a participant walking into an event with a bunch of people that we don't know really well, especially if you don't know the people really well. We immediately think in our minds that everybody's looking at us, everybody's judging us, we're judging ourselves, blah, 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 blah. And if you can like crack a joke with somebody or get them to smile or get them to like, wink or get them to shake your hand or, kind of tap them on the shoulder, like whatever. You just like find something in somebody and just play around with that a little bit. Help them become a little bit more playful so they just relax. That I find that to be very stimulating for the room as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things people want to feel is I belong here and I'm
Yeah.
seen. So you recognize who they are and you make them feel like they really do belong in the place, which means you've engaged with them and you know something that they have to offer, which it sounds like you were doing as a high school teacher. And we need to do when we're designing events. And even if we're designing for 2,000 people, not 100 people, where you can get to know everybody in a 100-person event, you can't in a 2,000-person event. We were talking before we went live about this idea of starting with the end in mind, and you're all about client experience and leading to the results that you want, whether it's sales, retention, referrals, whatever that goal is. Talk to me about some of the things you think about when you reverse that and reverse engineer that.
Yes, and something that I was sharing with you, Phil, at the beginning of this. This is something that I do for people. I don't advertise it. I don't sell it. It is not something that I offer. If I happen to have a consulting client and they are running events, because I'm usually getting brought in on the consulting side to help people with the retention of their coaching and education programs. Well, a lot of these larger scale coaching and education programs, there are fulfillment events that are part of the deliverable of the program. When it comes to retention of a program or reselling people or renewing people, it's not just the event, it's the totality of the experience from onboarding all the way through until the very end. And if fulfillment events are part of that, your fulfillment event plays a role in people making that decision for sure. So when it comes to renewals, I mean, that's kind of the thing that I'm known for in the larger scale coaching world. It's how do I structure everything going on in my program so that more people stay and more people are buying other things that we have to offer. So, one of the things I will do for those particular clients, and it's very few, I can count them all on one hand. I'm kind of like the mastermind behind how are we structuring the event from a content and curriculum perspective, and what is the experience that we want the attendees to have? How do we want them to feel? And we do have the end in mind. In those types of fulfillment events, especially if one of my clients is actually making the renewal offer and pitching from the stage for people to renew, then I have in my mind, I actually have the percentage and the actual number of people I want to renew at the event. So if it's 20, if it's 50, whatever, I know exactly how many people I want to turn that form in and put in their deposit before that event ends. So I'm reverse engineering from we want people to make that decision. Well, in order to structure this event, we need to know what these people want. So usually you have fulfillment events for programs that are longer. So they're either 6 to 12 months long. So you have time to get to know people. So how are you collecting information from the people in the room? What do they want? What do they want to experience? What do they want more of? What do they want less of in general inside of the program? And you're building those things in. Now, I have done a whole lot of, just in my consulting side, whether it's events or not, I've done a lot of third party interviews and I've collected so much data about what people actually want inside of programs. And you just carry this into your events, right? Like an event is just like a shorter program. What they tend to want more of, they want more spaciousness, they want more time for networking, they want more connection with their peers. They want to spend more time in conversation with the other people in the room. And they want to learn more from the other people in the room, less from the main person on the main stage or a whole bunch of just like separate speakers. They want to leave with real results and a real action plan they can implement. And ultimately, what they want is, you said this earlier, they want to feel a sense of belonging. They literally want to feel like the people in this room are my family, and they will even use that word. And you don't want to leave your family. You want to be with your family. And so if you can create that feeling of belonging and get people to actually say like, this is my family, these are my people, I belong here, you have done your job. And you will either make sales to get people into your program, or you will renew the existing people in your program. So I'm always thinking of that, and it's really knowing what people want. And then if your event is a multi-day event, it's also understanding, where am I going to do the pitch, and what needs to happen leading up to the pitch on day one, and what experience do they need to have on day one that then leads into the experience we can give them on day two that leads to the pitch, and then what are we delivering after the pitch so I can pitch again. So most, you don't want it to be monotonous, right? So at a lot of these events, if you're a business coach, you don't want to have 3 days of just business. Day one needs to be a lot of mindset, a whole lot of internal stuff, a lot of identity work, a lot of like breakthroughs, a lot of just that type of world, because you can't even get through to people if you can't get them to kind of break down a little bit. Then you can like build them back up and do all the good stuff with the business and then do your pitch. So you're also looking at that. You're looking at, how are you creating moments for people to be interacting with each other? Because I'm telling you, nobody, including me, and I can outfocus anybody, and I don't have ADHD, I don't think, but nobody wants to sit in a room and listen to speakers back to back to back to back to back for even 3 hours. So you really have to have like this dynamic show that you're putting on. So you get people to move around, get them to talk to each other, get them out of their comfort zone, do things outdoors, especially if you're near a park or a beach or the mountains, like send them on a hike at 6 a.m. in the morning before the show starts, or send them out to the beach for reflection time. Like there's so many cool things that you could do with the nature and environment around you, instead of just like staying in this like dungeon in the basement of the hotel that you're in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said several things I'd love to just go deeper in, but we do think, because I'm renting this building, I need to do everything in this building, and there's a lot you can do outside, whether it's in nature or other buildings in the area, if it's cold or too hot. So I love that. You almost everything that you described when you were saying, what do people want? I think 5 out of 7 things you said were about relationships.
Hmm.
The first word you used, though, I want to ask what it meant. People want spaciousness. What
Mm.
did you mean by that word?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that could be interpreted in different ways. They want less seat time, and um they want periods of time that isn't in the agenda.
Okay.
So they don't want the whole entire, from the moment I wake up and the time I go to bed, there is a plan and there's an agenda that we have to follow. So people want like, give us a 2-hour break to just go journal. Give us a 3-hour lunch to, not necessarily 3 hours, but like they just want more time that isn't like, okay, we have to start at 8, then we have to be here at 9, and then lunch is at 12, and then we're back in the room at 1, and then we have something at 5, and then there's an evening session at 7, and then we have to do this at 9. People don't really like that.
Yeah, I was reflecting on the state of mind that someone might show up at the conference that I'm planning for right now. And the person I had in mind is a woman who's, a mother. She's divorced, and she also is running a business. And so she's showing up, and there's been a lot going on in her life, and she's like stressed. The
Mm,
last thing she wants to do is sit down and go through a bunch of sessions. She needs an opportunity to wind down, to get connected, to ramp up to
yeah.
what's getting ready to happen. And I think that's probably true of most people when they show up at an event. Some people are ready to go no matter what you do. I met a guy yesterday who's like that. It's like he's just ready. But most
Mhm.
people aren't like that. They need some transition time. So is that
Yeah.
kind of what you mean, is creating
Yeah.
that space for people to really enter into what you're creating?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to look different for different folks, depending on the nature of your event. Um, so it's not always going to be the same. And look, I've been to events where the third day, the last day of the event, there is no plan. It's like this group is going to go play golf. This group is going to go fishing. This group is going to have a pickleball tournament. Now that's all pre-planned, but that does create this space for, again, connection to happen or for people to just recalibrate. And I think you bring up such a good point about the woman that you just mentioned. People are very overwhelmed, extremely overwhelmed, and very, very distracted, very, very high stress. And I think that we need to be extremely aware of that in the design of our events, that people are coming to us in that particular state. And so, are we crafting an event experience that's going to increase their level of overwhelm, stress, distractedness, too much information, overload, fire hosing them? That worked 5 to 10 years ago. And it just doesn't work today because we're dealing with a different like psychology of people today. It's a different society today. And people just can't handle that because we're all being bombarded with information and more every single day. And it's just not what people are looking for in a room when they go to an event anymore.
I've always wondered why this sounds like it's a praise. It was like drinking out of a fire hose.
Mm,
That to me does not sound like praise. It's like, how many drops can you get if you put your face in front of a fire hose? It's going to blast your face. You're probably
mm-hmm,
not going to drink very much. And so,
mm-hmm,
and you're right, like information is available anywhere you want to go online. People aren't looking for information, they've got that at their fingertips. But what do I do
yeah.
with that information, and how do I make the changes? Because, even me, like in my business, I know all these things I could do, but I need focus on
Mm-hmm,
what should I do. And an event like that sounds like it could really bring things into clarity on what I should do if it was designed right. But if
mm-hmm,
it just gave me 100 different new ideas and I still don't know by the end of it what my plan should be, that
mm-hmm.
wasn't super helpful. So you said something else though, and I don't know if you meant to say it, but I think you would believe this. You want to give someone an early success. If you're gonna lead them toward that retention choice or sales choice or whatever the choice that they need to make at the end, because it could be a commitment to themselves. There's a lot of different reasons people do events. They need that early win to keep going and wanting to enter in. How do you set that up?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same way if you were running a group coaching program or a course or a membership. We just happen to be talking about live events, which honestly is like a condensed version of a longer commitment to a longer term program. So, again, I think you have to really understand, what do your people want and need right now? Right? Like, this is such a good question coming on the heels of what you just said. If I go into a room and it's speaker after speaker or topic after topic, and I take 50 pages of notes, I'm one of those people who will take 50, I will try to write down every single thing that you say and still not know what am I supposed to implement when I leave here. And again, we have to understand that in the creation and design of our events today, people are people really only have the capacity in their mind to think about, what do I need right now? Like, what's the problem that is on fire in my life right now, or my business, or my relationship, or my finances? What's the on fire problem? And what's that, like, my hair's on fire, I want to get this result. But people are not thinking beyond like 30 days. I mean, what's the result that people need to go get today? Like, can you structure an activity where, for example, if you're teaching sales, have an activity where you're actually challenging people to go make an offer to 3 people in the next 15 minutes? Like, actually have people go do that thing, or have people make a commitment to something that maybe they know they should be doing and they actually know how to do it, but they're avoiding it. And can you help them make a commitment to what is that thing and when am I going to do it? And then Who am I going to report back to after I've done it? It's like little things like that. I think it's just a different way of us thinking. And it's getting away from, let me give them more information to fill them up.
Mhm.
And it's meeting people where they're at right now. And where people are at right now is, how can you help me in the next like moment? How can you next help me in the next 24 hours? What are those action steps that I can do right now in the room? And it doesn't necessarily have to be they go take an action, like go make 3 offers right now in the next 15 minutes. It could be some sort of awareness. It could be a mindset shift. It could be a breakthrough, a decision that you help them make. It could be a question that you ask and now they have more clarity. But it's just building those things in within the first like 30 minutes to an hour of your live event, and then sprinkling more of those so that what you're helping them do is stacking more of these wins as you go throughout the duration of your event.
You know, I know because you're in the coaching world, you would understand this, but and in coaching, you have a longer period of time to help someone make a change, make a transformation. Events want to do that, and I'm doing a lot of research into this, but I believe that an event can only be a catalyst to that. That you've got to do what you just described is know what that next step is going to be and keep making it. Because I think if you walk home with 50 pages of notes, they're probably going to sit on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I heard someone call them shelf notes.
Mm-hmm.
um, they're that you're not going to make any changes if you didn't distill that down to what is my one or two next steps going to be, because you've got to boil it down to something really simple to be able to do. Otherwise, I tell every speaker at our event, have actionable steps. Well, if you've got 50 sessions and everyone has three actionable steps, that's 150 things.
Ugh.
You can't do all 150 things. You
Right.
shouldn't do all 150 things, but how do I know which one, which
Mm-hmm.
two are for me right now? That takes guidance, that takes time to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. It does. And that's even something that you could build into your event, because if you do have multiple sessions, whether you're the only speaker or there are multiple speakers, you're right. A lot of them are going to give multiple action steps. So I think another really great tool or session to have in the event is at the end, it is helping people walk through, how do I decide and discern out of all the notes I wrote, out of all the things that I heard, what is my specific goal? What is the specific problem I need to solve? And what can I implement in the next like 3 to 5 days? Because again, people are in such a state where they seriously cannot see very far down the road. People really cannot see. It used to be like people, if you ask somebody like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? They're like, oh, well, I can't really see 10, but I could see 5 years. Now it's like people literally can barely see 90 days. And I would argue that people can't even see 90 days ahead right now. I think people can really wrap their mind around 30 days, maybe 60 days, but it's a live event. So let's just help people implement, like, what are you going to implement in the next, I don't know, 48 hours to 5 days, and get them to actually lock it into their calendar. And that's all they really need to know, because until they go take those three activities in the coming days, we don't know what next activity for them to take after that until we go gather the feedback and the data from those action steps. So again, I think it's this, as leaders, we need to have an awareness of the state of mind people are in. And obviously, if someone's a leader enough to fill a room with hundreds or thousands of people, they're probably a visionary who can see 10 years down. But the majority of the people in the room cannot. And I think that's what we tend to forget. And I really, again, I learned this as a classroom teacher. And you also learn this when you're running group programs and courses and events. The smallest percentage of people in the room are like you in terms of how they learn and how they prefer to process information. So you're in the front of the room for a reason. And a lot of people think, well, I know how I got here, so everybody has to operate the way I operated to get here. But maybe 10 to 15% of the room are going to operate the way you did. And that's also what I mean by meet people where they're at. Not everybody is a clone of you. And for every number of people in the room, there are that many different perspectives of the world. There are that many different processing styles. There's that many different emotions and combinations of things. And again, learned it from teaching in a classroom. If I have 30 kids in a classroom, there's 30 different ways that people are going to operate, and there's 30 different ways they're going to interpret what I'm saying, and no two people are the same. And we forget that. And then we have like this one standard way of teaching and talking to people, but it only works for a small few.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said something a little while back about talking to so many of the customers before you show up to an event. So you really understand who the people are. And I think for event organizers, that plan is super important. You may not be able to sit down if you have 1,000 people coming to your event, but you can do surveys and you can do focus groups and
Hmm.
get to know what those things are. But that leads me to a question, Megan. When someone shows up at an event, and let's say at the beginning of the event, you ask them, or maybe you've even asked them before they show up, what do you think your biggest need is that you want to solve during this event? What do you think? Do people really know? Are they self aware of what their greatest need is? Or does that change through the course of the event as they start to sit there and process? Or is it both and some people do know and other people don't? Like, what's your thought on that?
I think it's a both and. I think some people are aware and they know. I think it depends on the subject matter of that event, the purpose of the event, and the point of that person's journey they're on as it relates to that subject matter. I think that plays a really big role. So yeah, I think some people know. I think probably fewer know than uh, don't. I think because at a lot of events, this question is asked, like, what's your biggest intention, or what is your greatest need, or what is the result that you're looking for? And what I notice with people when I'm in the room, especially behind the scenes of other people's events, one of the things that I hear people say is, I just want clarity.
Mm,
So a
yeah,
lot of people, that's a very general statement.
sure.
Like, it's important, but what do you mean by clarity? So I think people always have a response for what's my greatest need, or what do I want out of this? But it's usually a general word. Clarity in what area of your life? Clarity around what topic? Clarity around what situation? And that's what I think people don't know. I think they're looking for something. They're looking for, what's my next step? What direction am I going to go in? What's my vision? I think that's kind of what people mean. They just feel like there's so many different things they could do, and they're sort of meandering around. I hear clarity a lot. I hear purpose a lot. That's another one I hear a lot. I want to like figure out what my purpose is. The other one I hear a lot is, I want to get clear on my vision. Again, there's a clarity one, but it's like this purpose, vision, clarity is kind of the big thing. I hear this a lot from women. I don't hear it much from men at events. I want to really connect with people. I feel very lonely. I feel alone. I want to connect with people. So, all those examples, I believe, are extremely general. And I think the specificity of what the person means by clarity, purpose, vision, connection, I think it's revealed to them with the content, the exercises, the activities that are planned for that event. And then it's, to a degree, it's up to that person to be open enough with an open hand to actually receive, well, what do I want clarity on? Because if you ask people, I think most people would not be able to answer that question at the beginning of the event. What do you want clarity on? I don't think they could answer that. I think their answer would still be pretty general.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it seems to me you do have to lead them down a path of asking questions as you go. I'm working with a coach right now who gave me a worksheet and it had at least a dozen questions. And I had a hard time working my way through it because it
Mm,
was too many questions at once.
mm,
And it seems like it might have been better if it had been chunkified,
yes.
if that's a word, to lead me from one step to the next step. Because I got overwhelmed by it and I put it
Yeah.
aside because I didn't know what to do with it. And then
Mhm.
finally he said, well, if you don't get through this, we're not going to be able to get your 90-day plan in place. And, I've got things I need to do in 90 days. So it's like, okay, I'll pick it back up. And, I was eventually able to get through it far enough to that we can have a conversation tomorrow.
Mhm.
And I'm excited for it. But I think at an event, if you come in confused, then and you throw a bunch of stuff at them, it's like they're not going to know what to do with that, and they might just shut down. Especially if they're
Mhm.
like me. I'm an introvert. You overwhelm me, I shut down, and I
Mm.
might leave.
Mhm.
I emotionally will for
Yes.
sure leave, But physically, I might leave too because, like, this isn't for me. They don't get me. I don't belong here. I don't know what to do with this. I'm gone.
I'm an
And then,
introvert as well. And that is a very common, if there's anybody listening to this that is an introvert, that is super common with us as introverts. I know people that will have to, like, if they're at an event where they actually have a vehicle and they could drive there, they will they will skip out on the group lunch and they'll go sit in their car during the whole entire lunch
mm,
just to be by themselves. Or they will walk out and walk way down the hallway and way down the lobby to the other side of the hotel and find a comfy chair to sit in for an hour. So that's super common with your introverts for sure. And you can kind of always tell who your introverts are if you're paying attention. And you should know who your introverts are. And here's the thing about introverts and extroverts that any facilitator of an event should know. You do not have to egg an extrovert on. You don't have to prompt them. You don't have to encourage them. They're going to engage and participate all on their own. And introverts are very easy to forget about because they're typically not the loudest. They're not speaking up. They're not the one rushing to the mic. They usually don't sit in the front of the room. They might head out for a little while. They're not sharing their voice as much as the extroverts are because again, the extroverts tend to be a little bit not loud people, but they're just willing to share their voice. And so the extrovert is like, well, like they've got it covered. I'll just stay back here. Lots of times introverts aren't going to really participate and engage unless you invite them to. So introverts do need to be prodded and poked and motivated and encouraged and invited and tapped on the shoulder. Like you have to do that with your introverts. So if you are leading events, the easiest thing to do, like I know we've talked about so much about learning the dynamics of people. The number one dynamic that I think is the easiest to spot is an introvert and an extrovert. And just watch their body language and watch who's talking and watch who's not talking in the room. The people not talking are typically your introverts. So those are the ones who you need to be encouraging and calling on and getting them to come to the mic because oftentimes the introverts too have something insanely valuable to share.
mm,
Because oftentimes the introvert, we speak once we have taken in all the information and we speak when we feel like we have something very wise to contribute. And so you're very much missing out on the introvert's wisdom when they are not given the floor because they're not going to usually take the floor on their own. And
yeah,
and I'm saying this is coming from someone who MCs events. I MC events
yeah.
and I am an introvert. And that is actually one of my secrets
Mm,
because I am very introverted at events, but I can speak on a stage. I can turn it on when I need to for short periods of time. And because I MC, everybody knows who you are and everybody knows your name. So it becomes this easy way for me to talk to people because I don't have to go up to people. They come up to me and they start the conversation with me. And it's a very easy in for me. So that's the other thing about an introvert. I don't go up to other people and strike up conversations if I don't know them. It's very awkward for me. I don't like to do it. I don't know what to say, but that is kind of like this. So I'm sharing that as an example because if you can get the introvert to actually come out of their shell, but you have to create the the pathway for them, then they're one of your biggest contributors in a room.
yeah, there's two things I was going to say is I'm also an introvert and I'm fine on stage. Or I'm just fine if I'm in charge. So if I'm in charge of a party or an event,
Mhm.
I have no problem connecting with people in the room. But if I'm not in charge, I shut down, I'm in my shell,
Mhm.
which tells me something. I think most of introverts would feel this way. If you give them a role, give
Yes.
them something to do, now all of a sudden I feel comfortable because I know what to do, and then I'll start talking to people. But the other things, and I don't know if these are directly related, but there's internal processors and external processors. And
Mhm.
in my experience, most introverts are internal processors. We need space away, maybe quiet space. So the person you said who walked down the hall and sat in a comfy chair, they're processing
Mhm.
what they've heard. It's not a negative
Mhm.
necessarily. They're not running away. It's like, I need to take in what I've thought about, and then I can come back and share the wisdom
Hmm.
that you've talked about. And so recognize that too, is people are going to process the information in different ways. Some people need
Yeah.
to talk it out, and those
Yes.
often are the extroverts.
Yeah.
They need to talk to people. And if they talk to an introvert, to say, I don't know, I can listen to you. I don't know what to say because I haven't thought about it yet.
Exactly. Yeah. I resonate with all that.
Yeah. Well, we are coming to the end of this conversation, and we've covered a lot of ground, and it's awesome. And there's so much more we could talk about because you're all about community, and we hardly touched on community here,
Hey, that's
except
okay. It all
that
relates.
maybe we'll talk about it someday. But there have been other episodes about that. We haven't talked about culture and the way that you read a room the way that we've done here today. So we're going to move to the signature sign off. And as I told you, I'd like to get 3 words that stand out for you from this conversation, and at least one should be emotional. And then I will play my saxophonic response to that.
Amazing. Okay. The first word that comes to mind is thoughtful. The second word that comes to mind is uh, not that we're like bubbly, but energetic. They're energizing. There was something very energizing about this conversation, from your questions to just our back and forth. It's very energizing. So thoughtful, energizing, and I would also say practical. I think we shared some really practical insights for people um, that they can implement at their own events. So those are my three.
And you said we were going back and forth. So at that level, it was like a tennis match,
Yeah.
but no one won. We're just still rallying.
We're stuck at deuce.
All right, here we go. I never know what's going to come out when I start responding to those words, but I've so enjoyed this conversation, Megan. It's frankly, we had never spoken before, so it's
Yeah.
been a great conversation. And I would love you to tell people, where are the best places to go to follow you and find out more about what you do.
Yeah, two best places. If you are listening to this podcast, then you're probably a podcast listener. So you can go listen to my show. It's called Built to Last. And then the other place is my community on Facebook. I run a Facebook group. It's totally free to join it. Phil's in there. It's called Structured Freedom Inc., community for coaches. So that's where a lot of the magic happens in my world.
All right, I'll provide links to both those things in the show notes. Thank you again for being on the show, Megan. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.